an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 3, Episode 7, Poached Eggs. In this episode, I'm very happy to say that Katie is back involved in the main part of the story and is no longer in the hospital. Also, we find out something that I think many of us suspected about Frey, although I have to confess I am not totally sure how much I believe this reveal either. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you very much to Jessie for commissioning this episode. Y'all, this episode has so many, weird little detail. I have to confess my frustration with one particular thing that's been going on. And I'm not even, I won't even say I'm mad about it, but we have this whole thing with, magic having disappeared. And we're trying to bring magic back. But then every episode, there is at least one, if not two or three, back doors to that there's loopholes all over the place. Oh, so-and-so had batteries. Oh, and it turns out there are a lot of batteries and people can actually make magical generators. And oh, I got the extract from some magical creature that I was able to snort to do the thing. Oh, and other magical creatures like vampires or werewolves can hold on to their magic forever as well. And they're not affected by this magic shutoff. I really feel like I understand wanting to ride that balance between magic is gone and we need them to have this incredibly important overarching mission for the whole season. And also the show is called The Magicians. And I know that it's probably going to be frustrating for our audience to watch an entire season that's truly magic free. But I want there to be one, maybe two loopholes that that are being fought over continually, rather than, for example, the battery that the professor drops when she's about to commit suicide and that breaks on the street. We have this moment of, oh my God, I can't believe it broke. But then it's immediately followed up by, oh, but there's alternatives that we can use. And that just takes a lot of the urgency out of it when that keeps happening. And I keep feeling we know that every time something doesn't work, they're immediately going to find some other obscure thing. And it's never a huge battle to get at it either. It'll take the whole episode, but they will, within the same episode, get access to whatever it is. So I just feel if they're going to decide that the mission is we need to bring magic back, at the very least, just figure it out as writers before you decide, oh, we're going to have magic completely turned off. Figure out a more consistent way to deal with that in the upcoming season than instead of just being oh, I don't know, as they go along, they'll find different batteries of it. I mean, come on, right? I can't be alone in feeling this way. It sort of cheapens the whole mission in a lot of ways. The one thing that they have done is make the batteries breakable, or they have a limited shelf life, so eventually it will run out. But again, it's hard for me to be concerned about it because I know that there is going to be some other thing that they managed to find and it's going to be fine. So I just wanted to start off with that because this episode really probably was had the most loopholes so far. And I'm just getting a little impatient with it. Okay. when we start off this episode, we are like engaging in this emergency evacuation when I say evacuation, it makes it sound like there are way more people involved, but it's just Elliot and Margo gathering up their hostages and Flea assisting them and them trying to explain to him that they are going to be leaving the castle and that he needs to come up with a cover story for why they're gone. And it's amazing because like they tell him that we have chicken pox and say something like that, like something really contagious. And of course, they don't really think about the fact that he does not know what chicken pox is. So when they come back later, in order to make their story seem more believable, there are just feathers all over the throne room, which I love this. I'm assuming that his interpretation of chicken pox was some kind of disease that literally turns you into a chicken, which frankly, I'm here for that. And I would have liked to actually see a manifestation of that idea. But what it is that Margo and Elliot are up to is they are going to be hiding the hostage eggs in their world and hopefully thus keeping them safe from the fairy queen. Now, guys, we saw, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but we saw fairies in the room behind Julia when she's holding the truth key. So it's more that they don't believe she will pick out the particular cubbyhole that they are being kept in out of everywhere in their world, rather than I don't think the fairy queen can come into our world at all, right? Because I think that they can, clearly. Like, it's not like it's off limits to her. But I will say, and granted, I know that they picked this spot because they could have somebody that they know and trust look over them and they'd be nearby. But I will say that, like, out of all of the places in our world that you could hide them, putting them in a place where you have lived most of the time that you have had magic in this world seems incredibly obvious and poorly thought out. And I would have absolutely loved it if they did something like go buy a safe deposit box. Like, how hilarious would that have been if that was like what people needed to get through? But the point is, this episode, first of all, we need to see Todd again, because apparently he's going to be a thing. And Frey needs to find the eggs and like be appalled at their behavior and the fact that they would take children hostage. So that wouldn't have worked, but I really would have enjoyed it if they did something really like elaborate, but also very ordinary human behavior of just like, oh yeah, I have something that's extremely valuable that I want to keep safe. I'm going to buy a safe deposit box the way that anybody would do for a valuable thing that they just are trying to keep away from prying eyes. So these two, when they like assign Todd to it, you know that shit's not going to go well. And they are out like heading towards the portal, I guess, to come back. I'm trying to remember because they're out in the woods. But they run into Quentin and Poppy. And Poppy is just really trying to insinuate herself into this story. As time goes on, I become more and more comfortable with the idea that Poppy is just kind of a sociopath who is like really... A sociopath isn't really the right... Because she clearly can like understand emotions and has some empathy because of the way that she like talks to Quentin later. But she just isn't feeling the urgency, or at least isn't like outwardly expressing that she understands how everybody else is feeling, and has this sort of like cavalier attitude about it all, and is treating it all like it's some big romp, like there really isn't a whole lot at stake. Which is a weird thing for somebody who has seen most of their class commit suicide in front of them. So, like, initially, I really was like, okay, clearly, like, there's something just straight up wrong with Poppy. But now I'm like, okay, I think the show just wants us to find her, like, whimsical and unbothered. It's just a hard thing to kind of reconcile somebody being unbothered after what she went through and not being a terrible person. So I'm having a lot of trouble with, like, what I am meant to take away from who she is as a character. And I suppose that, like, time will tell. We haven't been around her long enough. It's been an episode and a half. And I do find her entertaining in her way, but I feel like I just don't have a good grip on what I'm supposed to be feeling towards her as a character a lot of the time. Does that make sense? So she wants to be part of this quest. Later on, it's because she wants to see one of these, like, rare types of dragons. In this moment, she is, like, meeting Margo and Elliot for the first time, and she says something about how, like, I'm coming with him, or I'm helping. And Quentin's like, she's not helping me. He keeps arguing with her about her involvement. But yeah, they come out of the portal into the physical kid's house, and the fish is flapping on the wall, making the singing I'll survive, which is pretty good. And then we see Alice on the floor. And it turns out that Quentin is able to get to her in time. Shocker. She's fine. But she's not really fine. Like, this is going to be something that continues to happen. And pretty much everybody is, from Dean Fogg to What's-Her-Face that they go and talk to later, everybody is sort of impatient with Julia over the fact that she wanted to get rid of magic at all. That she's not willing to just... You know, nobody really knows the trauma, it turns out, because I had been asking that last episode whether or not Dean Fogg, like, understood what had happened to her. And this episode, she says something about how it's personal. And that was the only clue I've gotten, that he isn't fully aware. And even if he were, I am not sure it would even matter, because he seems pretty much to, like, not want to hear it. Jessie says, I'm not a big fan of Poppy either. I don't really find her relatable at all. Yeah, it's just like, I feel like we have met a lot of characters, especially on this show, who just take a certain glee in, like, making people suffer. And that really is the vibe I get off of Poppy. And I don't think that's, like, what I'm intended to get. But she just feels like a bad guy because she just seems to be so uninvested in what's going on around her that there's an impression of otherness to her. Ooh, God, I'm sorry, guys. That was my Bluetooth speaker shutting off that I'd forgotten about. So yeah, I just don't know. We'll see what happens with her. But as of right now, I just don't really get what they're going for here. If she were this, like, this sort of character with this attitude of whimsy, but they ran across her like making the best of it, living in, like, a little hut somewhere in Fillory after she realized she couldn't get back to her own world. That's one thing. She's just, like, trying her best. But this is somebody that we found floating on a raft after her entire class, or almost all of them, killed themselves, and then she purposefully hands over a key that killed them indirectly, but nevertheless, to one of our people. And it's sort of like it's just treated like we're supposed to just sort of get over it. And that, for me, that's like fairy level shit. You know, she is being that kind of sketchy. The fairies would be very pleased with Poppy, I feel like. So yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so Julia is talking to, it's kind of funny actually, because I understood Dean Fogg being impatient with Julia giving away her magic. I have a hard time with, because he doesn't know why. But I do love that when they're talking about what's going on with Alice in the next scene, Julia keeps being like annoyed that Dean Fogg doesn't have more answers. And I am just like, Julia, what part about he has not done this, or if he has, it has not gone well, did you not understand? She keeps acting like he's just withholding to be a dickhead. And it's like, you knew that this was all an experiment, that nobody knew what was going to happen. So you don't really get to be demanding of information when you fully were aware of what the fuck the deal was when you decided to do this, despite everyone telling you that it was maybe a bad, dangerous idea. And Quentin, of course, he wants to be the one that helps like make this right because it's Alice who's hurt. And Julia has to take him aside and just be like, no, look, this is between her and me. Honestly, you didn't really have anything to do with this. I am going to fix it. You go off and find the key. We're pretty much all depending on you to bring magic back. So no pressure. So this leads to Quentin going to talk to Penny about Penny being able to help because the key is now in the underworld and Penny is dead, which Penny is like, no, I'm not. And Quentin has to be like, look, dude, I know that maybe like technically you're not, but we burned your corpse. Like, you don't have a body to go back to. So while maybe technically you're not, you're going to have to come to terms with, practically speaking, yeah, you are. And this is something that you can help us with because of the state you're in. And I really don't like, I know that you act like you don't give a shit, but a lot of times when it comes down to the clutch moments, you do tend to suddenly find it within yourself to want to help. So I'm just really hopeful that that dude is in you still somewhere, because this is extremely important and we can't do anything. Now, anybody who's in the chat, help me out here, because I'm sure that we were told a reason why they can't just go back into the underworld the way that they did once before. Like Quentin and Julia went down there. Pretty much they caused a bunch of trouble, stole a shade, and bounced. So I'm assuming that that's why they can't go back down to the underworld. Like they're too recognizable and nobody would help them and assist them. But I don't really remember it being said exactly what the deal is. But whatever the case, they are going to have to depend on Penny this time around. And Penny finally agrees to help. But yeah, it takes a little doing. He's being a dick about it. And this was one of those moments where I kind of like, I had the least understanding. Michael says they used a dragon before, right? That doesn't seem like a well they can go back to. I don't understand why not. That's my point, Michael, is like, they did that once before. I don't know why they would have to why they wouldn't be able to do it again. Ashley says they would have to have something valuable enough to trade for access to the underworld. That they're willing to get rid of. Right. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's like, I don't remember what they even traded last time, to be honest. But yeah, I feel like if it's just like we don't have something valuable enough, that feels like kind of a weak barrier. But I also understand just being like, well, our friend here is basically dead. So rather than like deal with this, it seems like this other thing is the easier option for us this time around. Ashley says the button to Fillory was what they traded last time. That's right. Thank you. All right. So I see that the button of Fillory is like a really particularly valuable object. But anyway, Penny's not willing to help initially. Like he winds up being convinced, but did anybody else like feel a little baffled by his reticence here? Because Penny wants a new body so that he can come back into the world. And guess what you need for that, Penny? Fucking magic. Hi. Like, The lack of magic is what killed you. Really, you got poisoned by going to this part of the library that you weren't supposed to. But if magic had still been around, Katie could have performed this spell earlier and saved you. And now, you know, there's this whole thing with maybe being able to like rebuild you a new body from scratch. Why wouldn't he be interested in assisting them in this way? I don't really understand why he's putting a fight up. I feel like it's just meant to be like, oh, you know, Penny, he can be a real pain in the ass, and we needed to have this moment between him and Quentin, but it just didn't feel really believable to me. In the end, like I said, he winds up agreeing to help, and part of what it is that they need to do is get help from the feed buzz woman that I think her name is Harriet, if I'm not mistaken. I think they say that at another point because I kept having trouble remembering her name. And there's like no love lost between, because at first he's like, we need another traveler, and there's the girl Victoria that they go and see, who Poppy knows, because they were all in the same class together. Evidently they had been like best friends, and Poppy slept with Josh, Victoria's boyfriend at the time. Guys, I'm going to take a little detour here. Can we talk about the fact that these two super hot girls are fighting over Josh? I mean, come on. Am I wrong here? Josh is no prize. Like, he's fine. He's a fun guy. He's amusing to be around. But, like, the idea that that their friendship fell apart because of him is so ludicrous to me. Like, Josh is not that good looking. He's not like that motivated. I mean, he's motivated when it comes to making drugs, okay? But he just doesn't really seem like somebody that fits into what these two girls seem to be about. And I cannot, with the fact that this is how the story is deciding to go, that like these two girls who are model pretty and both very intelligent and seem to be extremely capable are both like caught up and had their friendship ruined by fucking Josh. What? No, I'm sorry. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Ashley says, hashtag all Kevin James movies. And Jessie says, was just about to say Kevin James syndrome. Yeah. Guys, I don't know if y'all know what Quentin Tarantino's wife looks like, but I gotta be honest. I found out this morning and I'm just so angry. Like, there's a picture of the two of them together and he literally looks like he slept in his clothes. And she is standing next to him in this sparkly white mini dress, looking like a literal otherworldly goddess being. And this fucking schlub is holding her hand, looking like he was like living in a cave. I don't know why is the world like this? It makes me so upset. Women have to put so much effort in, and guys are just applauded for showing up. Josh is fine as a funny aside. He's an amusing person to have involved here and there. I haven't really missed him that much being gone. If he showed up again, I'd be like, oh, hey, Josh is back. But it's not like, oh, where's Josh? We need Josh. I really want to know what's going on with Josh. And these two girls, come on. Can we just have them hook up, please? These two girls should put aside Josh entirely and be together themselves. That'd be fine. I'd be good with that. Anyway, I'm sorry, guys. I just had to address it because, like, Lord Almighty, come on. So what we wind up doing, first of all, is there is a reveal when Margo and Elliot come back to Fillory after hiding the eggs. Flea explains to them that first, his plan worked. The Fairy Queen has no idea that they were gone. But he has this look on his face. And Margot's just like, what's with the face? And he takes them to a spot in the road where there is a sign hanging that says death to floaters, which I just keep forgetting that they call the mountain like floating tribe floaters, which is just so gross. But there are 6 bodies, I believe, impaled on stakes, Vlad style, on the sides of the road. And what he says is that the floaters have essentially decided that this marriage, this alliance, means that all of this land is now theirs, and they have been like pillaging it. And I really feel so bad for Margo and Elliot, because the two of them are just trying to put out fires, and every time a new fire starts, they still haven't coped with the other 3, and they seem to feel that the 3 they were already working on is the one that they should still be focused on. But it always feels that the people who live in Fillory disagree and believe the new fire is the one that they should be focusing all of their energy on. And Elliot and Margo are like, let us get finished with this one fire before we start on the other one. And by the time they even get close to dealing with that other fire, the new fire has completely overtaken everything that remained. And this is what there's a reason why a lot of presidents, and I say a lot of because I'm not including our current president in this, why a lot of presidents seem to age about 12 years for the 4 years that they're in office, because I imagine this is probably what it's actually like if you're doing your job. Constant putting out fires and constant feeling of, I'm focusing on the wrong fire. Oh my God, oh no. Like, I made a mistake. This isn't the fire I should have been even looking at. What did I do? So these floaters are bad news. We knew this because the queen was like trying to bond with Margo over being like, I also made a deal with the fairies. But we don't know what that is. I don't know how much I even trust her about that, because it was clear that she was trying to like lure Margo down into the dungeon to be with her son, the whole thing. And I don't understand. There's sort of a reveal at the end that the fairy queen was like ready to abandon them to their fates, essentially. And I can't decide if the implication is that the fairy queen was riling everybody up on purpose to make them like, it feels like what she was doing was, I want to make you look like incompetent idiots. And that seems to be what Margo and Elliot believe. And they are trying to get it so that everybody all of the people of Fillory can see the Fae and realize, oh, it's not that they were incompetent idiots, it's they were being pushed to do this by the Fae. But I think what Margo and Elliot misunderstand is that doesn't necessarily make it better. That even if they can see the Fae and know that they have been involved, that doesn't change the fact that you made a deal with them in the first place, which you should know better than to do. And that makes you, in your way, incompetent anyway. But was that the whole plan? Was that all that the fairy queen? Because she says something about how, of course, you humans would think it was that simple. So it doesn't seem like they're on the right track there. And I assume I don't have enough information to really know that the true reason behind all of this, because I don't really have any good theories on that. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Nevertheless, I just really, this twist here, I have like mixed feelings about. They're making a deal with her in exchange for she says, in exchange for my babies, you want my bathtub. And it's a weird thing because I didn't think this was what they wanted, was just to expose her to all of Fillory. I thought what they wanted was to make a deal for her to get her fingers out of mortal affairs entirely. I would have liked to see a version of this conversation where they attempt to get her to agree to that and fail, and so then go for the bathtub thing because they decide, well, if people can see them, at the very least, that's accomplishing something. But it feels like they don't even attempt to get her to extricate herself from the workings of their kingdom. Like, I thought ending the occupation was the thing. And it turns out to not be at all. And I don't really know when that when keeping them from getting involved in everything stopped being the objective. Does this make sense to you guys? You get what I'm saying with my confusion here? Michael says, I think revealing the fairies' role behind the scenes is more valuable than ending the occupation because they need to get the common folk on their side. Yes, I get what you're saying. I just don't feel like this is going to get the common folk on their side the way they think. Like I said, finding out your rulers who should know better went ahead and made a deal with the Fae. Just sounds like, oh, these are people whose judgment can't be trusted overall because they don't know who to do business with and who not to, and when to be smart and when not to. Because really the only way to get people to understand why Margo made that choice is to explain the specific circumstances behind her making the deal and how Elliot was literally in the middle of a fight and needed magic to win the fight. I mean, all of that is such detailed, like, in-depth explanation, and people aren't going to want to hear that. People are soundbite friendly, and they are going to want a really quick rundown. And all they're going to hear is, she made a deal with the fairies so he'd win a sword fight. And that is not going to impress people, I don't feel. Sue Hayes says, yet enough Americans still support 45. Sue, preach in the choir, sister. Amen. And yeah, this is sort of like, that's sort of what I mean here is that, like, Americans as a macrocosm are a good barometer. Bad things are happening, right? We know why. If we look at historically what's been happening, at legislation that's being passed, at the changes in taxation on the upper class, and the fact that we don't have any safety nets for those who are disadvantaged or even who make the average and are still unable to pay for healthcare, etc. We have all the data we need to know exactly why things have gone down the way they do. It does not change the fact that people are continuing to blame the most vulnerable members of society for their problems and continuing to like pick fights amongst themselves. And by themselves, I mean lower classes, rather than blaming the people that actually deserve it. And all this to say, when you're in a monarchy, whether or not they made certain choices for good reasons, that those facts don't matter. People hear the very small bit of information. They made a deal with the Fae, and that's, I feel like, all that they're going to hear. All of the reasoning behind that, the fact that Margo and Elliot are really trying, that everything that they have done along the way has been not out of selfish motivation, but in the interest of trying to keep things as easy on everyone else as possible and bring magic back, which will also increase like the livelihoods of everyone. I don't feel like that's going to be enough. And that's just sort of like what's terrible about people. I hope I'm wrong. I would love it if the Fillory people were like more reasonable and willing to listen. But like based on the way the end of this episode goes, I feel like maybe not. I don't know. It's and you know, the fact is too that you have to get people to believe what you're saying in the first place. So even if she explained, this is why I made this deal with the Fae, I don't know how many people are actually going to like believe that. But anyway, so the Fairy Queen, and this is my other thing. I had really hoped that there would be an explanation as to why these particular babies that they abduct are so valuable, because there's literally acres of them growing. This isn't like, it feels very different than threatening a baby that's like either somebody is still carrying the child or a baby that has been born and is being raised. When they're in the ground and there are literally thousands of them, it doesn't feel like the Fae treat them like they are babies. There weren't guards around the place. There weren't anybody attending to these like mushroom farms. It was nothing like that. So the fact that the queen is taking this seriously as a hostage situation also really surprised me, because it kind of felt like I said something about how these were red toadstools, and I'm hopeful that this means that they're like royalty or something that will make them more important. Doesn't seem that way. I don't know if it's supposed to be that they're all white mushrooms until they mature and the red ones are the ones that are like ready to go. But she is surprisingly easy to manipulate at this point when it comes to this. Like it's a weird sort of compliance that I didn't expect to see from her, and which I have to admit makes me extremely suspicious, because there is so much double dealing going on. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Elliot and Margo, while they are hiding these eggs, Fen and Frey and Todd all come back. They talk about how they were in the square of time. A man urinated next to me. And I like that Elliot says something about like, did you like anything about it, Frey? And he says something like, you know, I know you might find this hard to believe, but I do want you to have a good time. And she says, I know you want to be a good father, and that's sort of sweet. I suppose I could grow to despise you less. You know, progress, I suppose. But once she finds out that they have taken these baby fairies hostage, that all flies right out the window. As far as she is concerned, this is unforgivable. They are holding children hostage, and she turns on them, as I think we all knew she would, right? Where she goes and tells the fairy queen immediately, not only that they have like what they have, but where they are. And there's a lot of sort of back and forth here with them trying to explain to Frey that she is not a fairy and that the Fae don't see her as one of them, that she isn't going to become one of them ever, that this has been a bargaining chip. She is a bargaining chip, and that's just the reality of the situation. For her part, Frey is unwilling to hear that. She feels that she is part of the Fae. She says something about how, like, well, we have honor. And Fen very gently, and honestly, Fen is so patient and sweet here. It just warmed my little heart, even though I know that it's not going to do any good. Fen is like, sweetie, they are not your family. And she says something about how I can't believe you stole babies. And Fen is like, they literally stole you from us. And Frey says, you made a deal, and Fen gets really offended because, as we know, Margo made that deal, not Fen. And she says, no, I did not. But Frey does not want to hear it. She then turns up later in the throne room, having told the queen about where the eggs are. Both Elliot and Fen seem really hurt at the fact that she could not be trusted, that she would do this. And at this point, she says something about family loyalty with a real smugness. It's only like 10 seconds later that the fairy queen says something about, how about we make a deal? You don't harm my children and I won't harm yours. To which Frey is like, wait, what? Now, there are a couple of tactical issues here for me. First, I feel like if the queen was going to make this threat, you want to do this where Frey can't hear, because it is extremely advantageous to her to keep Frey thinking she is part of the Fae and that she has a place here with you, right? Don't you think that seems like a way to handle Frey? Like, she came and told you all about this because she perceives herself to be more part of your family and culture than her own. So that worked out. Keep that going. But instead, the queen shows her hand immediately and essentially like tells Frey, oh no, you're definitely not one of us. I didn't see you as one of us to begin with, but then you just went and betrayed your own parents. So now I extra don't care about you because you have no loyalty at all, which results in Frey suddenly piping up and saying, I'm not actually your kid. I'm just a human. And the fairy queen cuts her off and stops her from talking. And this leads to both Elliot and Fen being like, oh, no. Please tell us what the fuck she was just saying. And the fairy queen admits, and I say admits because, again, I'm not totally sure how much of this I buy. The fairy queen admits that, in fact, their actual daughter died in childbirth. And this is some other human that has been pretending to be their daughter. And that's the end of her leverage. And so she winds up having to make a deal with Margo and Elliot. I don't really know why this wouldn't be exactly what it looks like, but I find it difficult to believe that what happened here is as simple as what it looked like. There's a couple of things here, like she turns and says something to Frey, like, you betrayed your own parents. Why would I ever trust you? And then immediately we find out that these aren't her real parents. So why would it matter to the fairy queen that she betrayed her own parents if both she and Frey know that these are not her own parents? That moment of disowning her, allegedly because she betrayed Margo and Elliot, doesn't work if it's supposed to be that they have both been aware the entire time Frey isn't who they've been saying she is. I don't get that at all. So I don't know, guys, like, help me out here if I'm like missing something that's really obvious, but it feels like the show wanted to have like two things be true that don't work together. And I either am not getting it or I'm supposed to just sort of blow past that and ignore it. And I have grown too suspicious of the Fae to be willing to do that. I'm not ready to just be like, oh, I guess that just doesn't make sense. It's fine. So yeah, I'm just struggling with that. And this leads me to later on be like really distrustful of what it is that the queen says when they are in the carriage together of essentially she has gone through with this deal. And it seems that all of the people of Fillory are able to see her and see all of the rest of her people, all of the Fae. But then she manages to literally just like vanish into thin air. So whether they can see them all or not ultimately appears to be irrelevant because the Fae can make themselves not be or be wherever it is they need to be for the moment. And so the people of Fillory are able to see them if they happen to be hanging around, making it very obvious, yes, we have been behind it all. But they just decide to make like a tree, and there's no evidence that they were behind it all, beyond still just what Margo and Elliot tell everyone. Ben. Hi, Ben. Ashley says, maybe the fairy queen was playing a long con. She's trying to make Elliot and Margo believe that Frey's in actual danger, and Frey didn't pick up on it in time. Maybe that is what pick up on the fact that she was not in danger at all. Interesting. Yeah, I guess I don't even know if I would say that Frey didn't pick up on it in time, Ashley. I think what it seems like is that Frey started to realize that Margo and Elliot were like actually decent people who really cared about her because they thought she was their daughter. And she was trying to like sort of give them an out a little bit and be like, you know what, guys, don't even worry. I was mistaken. But I guess you're right. I was mistaken would have to hinge on her suddenly realizing that the queen doesn't see her as one of them. And so, because otherwise they have been making it clear that they care about her because she is their daughter this whole time. So, yeah, I could see what you're saying, that she was like supposed to play along and she realized all of a sudden that maybe the queen, as much as like they both know she's not really Frey, the queen is willing to see this through to the end as if she were and would kill her. And she doesn't really know how to handle that now that the stakes have changed. Maybe that's what it is. Okay. That's tricky, but I guess I could be all right with that. But yeah, in the end, the queen just bounces up out of the carriage and the doors of the carriage open and it's a bunch of the people of Fillory protesting and physically dragging Margo and Elliot out of the carriage while they're carrying torches and chanting and carrying them off into the night. It's a real eat the rich situation, it feels like. And it's the kind of thing that, in its way, I could see being very cathartic. And so, like, the people of Fillory, I mean, they have been going through absolute hell and apparently have been being pillaged. So in some ways, I'm predisposed to be like, ooh, kids, I get it. I'm sorry. But, you know, that sucks. So let's bounce back and talk about what's going on with the school being purchased by this woman. I can't remember what this woman has been in otherwise. I feel like I loved her in whatever else I saw her in. Can you guys remind me of her character's name? Because it turns out she bought the school and she tries to say that, like, well, at least I care about it. And Fogg gives her a very skeptical look and says, you care about something. And clearly is not buying her little act here, which I found kind of amusing. There is something about Fogg as the, like, he's like the Greek chorus this season, where he's just like in the background getting drunk and being like, yeah, that doesn't sound real. That's not going to work. You fucking idiot. Like, I kind of am here for Fogg. I love that they have leaned into his uselessness in a way. They make him like a starting point for a lot of stuff. Like, he has like the access to things, but he isn't actually like that helpful beyond just pointing them in the general direction of an answer. So yeah, this woman is like, they're finally telling her the truth about why they came to her home last time and that, she, you know, stealing the key and everything. And she essentially is like, oh, okay, so you're telling me that you like came into my home under false pretenses, lied about who you are, lied about who had magic, and that you now want me to do you a favor after you have admitted to being full of shit the entire time. You know what? Miss me with that. I'm not interested. And valid. It's hard to be angry with somebody who has that POV. Like, you know what? She has a point. But as it turns out, she will be willing to help them because she figured, like, they explain what we're doing is supposed to bring back all of magic. Like, you should be invested in this. So guys, I really do enjoy this a lot, to be honest. She has the essence of a magical creature for Julia to snort. They both thought this was going to be handing over another, like, battery. They were wrong. That is not what this is going to be at all. And Julia's a little bit weird about it, but does it. And then when she begins to use the magic, she says something about how weird it feels. And there's a certain, like, black smokiness to the spell as she's casting it. Sue says Irene McAllister, I think. Irene. Okay. Noted. Thank you, Sue. I wonder if the fairies that Julia saw hanging, or that Julia did not see, that we saw hanging around in the house, are the ones who this is made out of or made from somehow. Is that possible? Does Irene have magic hanging around her house because of a Fae deal? Is that what's going on here? Irene herself is not Fae, I don't think. Unless, I don't really know how things work in this universe. Can you be partially Fae? Is there, because I know like in a lot of universes you can be half human, half Fae. And I'm wondering if that's a possibility here or not. Because the fact that Julia didn't see, like when I first saw her picking up the key, I thought that it was like, oh, it reveals the truth to you basically about like yourself. I thought that it was something that you would see the truth in general. And it seems like that can be it as well. But the fact that the Fae appeared behind Julia, I guess, was her seeing the truth about where she was standing in that moment. She was seeing the truth in many things, not just the one thing. I would love a representation of what it is like to see the, like, you know, we saw the key being used for one boy to confess his love to another boy in that like moment with the ghosts, which was really sweet. I would love a sort of interpretation of what it looks like on their end to like, or maybe it doesn't look like anything. Maybe it's suddenly they're overcome with like the certainty, the knowledge that, oh, he loves me, you know? But regardless, I'm so caught up on this thing with the Fae that appeared behind her. I just want to know what that's about. So anyway, she agrees to help. Julia uses this magic to cast a tracking spell because Alice basically bumped up out of that fucking hospital room as soon as she was feeling well enough and is out here trying to like ransack Break Bill's storage area in order to get at some alleged like contraband that can help her hold on to her magic despite the fact that she is ill. And she runs into the professor who had been trying to kill herself, who is like stealing a bunch of shit. And that woman tells her, oh, all of the stuff you mentioned that you want isn't going to work. The only thing that probably works will be the steroids. So here, take these. Good luck. And the place that Julia finally catches up to Alice is out in an alley where Alice is going to turn into a vampire because creatures are able to keep their magic. And Julia stops her. Alice and her get in a fight, and Alice tosses Julia like into the back of like a truck that's sitting there, like of semi, and knocks Julia out cold and is overcome with remorse pretty much immediately. And by the time Julia wakes up, Alice is like, your magic is back. I'm really, really sorry. Oh my God. I didn't mean to do that. I really just can't deal with this stuff. So you take it. So, I kind of like that because I was concerned that they were going to try and turn Alice into a big bad this season by having her take Julia's magic and refuse to give it back. And then like, maybe it doesn't just hurt her, but it begins to like warp her in some way. And I was just like, oh man, I don't want more evil Alice. Like, I don't want to do this. So I like the fact that it resolved this way with her realizing her own mistake and her own limitations and that this was just a bad idea. But then we go on to what's going on with Katie. And I find this very amusing, because Quentin is talking with Penny. Quentin and Poppy are talking with Penny about where Katie's at. Cause he, being on the astral plane can like just jump wherever apparently still. And he goes to see where Katie's at, and she's fucking locked in a psych ward in like a high risk, isolation area. And he is fucked up seeing her like this. She's just been sedated and is just sitting there staring into space. And it turns out that both Quentin and Poppy have their own experience with having been in a mental health facility, and they know all of the ins and outs of what it means to be committed and kept voluntarily or involuntarily, what the requirements are, the kinds they have, like an understanding of what can be expected from the facility if it is a state-run facility versus a private facility, and what they have to say and do to be taken seriously and let in, and how, like, there's a lot about this that I really appreciate, because I always, like, you know how, guys, you know what I'm like with logistics. Like, I'm all about the logistics. And for me, things like this, I always get caught up on nobody knows that they're not real doctors. Nobody checked on this. Come on. I love that they get out ahead of that and they explain. I mean, they'll check eventually, but it's going to be, by the time they do, we're long gone. That feels real to me. Like, it's crazy how behind the times government run facilities are. They talk about something like, they say something about how most of their files aren't digitized yet, even. It has to be all checked through paper, which is true. And I mean, how crazy is that? It's nuts to me. It makes total sense, of course, but it's still just like the fact that anything for profit is light years ahead of government stuff is just really frustrating. But yeah, the two of them get in there to talk to Katie. And she accidentally drops the pass that she's supposed to be getting in order to break out. Now, guys, is it accidental? Because I thought at first that she did it on purpose because she was essentially like rejecting the plan. And then it felt like it was an accident based on the expression on her face. Like, she looked like she was really upset about it. And I was like, oh, maybe she wasn't rejecting it. Maybe this was just, you know, the handoff wasn't well done. So she winds up back in isolation, and Penny comes to see her and is just like, dude, come on, please help. And she is extremely frustrated. She's kind of putting up the same fight that he was putting up with Quentin. And it's honestly like, I don't care much about Penny himself, but seeing him arguing with Katie, like, the two of them are just such believable. They're such a believable couple. I can't put my finger on what it is that makes people feel like they have chemistry or not, but the two of them are just so real to me. They're so obviously together. They so obviously have a history. It just feels so legit in a way that, like, is extremely rare for me when I watch TV. I'm not even trying to say within this show it's not done often. In the whole of television, it's not done well often. And these two just fucking nail it. And there's like a sort of tiredness, but an affection still when they talk. That's just like, oh, I knew you were going to fucking say that because of course you do. But also that's what I love about you. And it's adorable, but I hate you. Go away, but don't go. Like, it's just so real. I love it. So he convinces her to help, finally, which leads to this amazing breakout scene that is just a disaster. I mean, they really, in the end, basically just go balls to the wall and punch their way out of the building. And she goes to talk to Harriet, the feed buzz lady, and makes some deal. She says something about, because the feed buzz lady is basically like, oh, you're asking me for another favor? I will have you know, you never paid me back for the first favor that I did you. Penny might have died. That's not my problem. I gave you what you asked for. And she agrees to something that we don't see because she uses the ASL. Is that the word? And American Sign Language. Yeah. And she said, like, the Harriet replies, do your friends have any idea what you just signed them up for? And then she comes back to them and is like, okay, so she's going to help. And I'm like, what'd you do, Katie? What's up? What'd you do, girl? Huh? I trust Katie though. So, and you know, why do I trust her? She just seems like the person in these that's like the most level-headed and doing the thing that I understand most of the time. So I'm worried about the deal she made, but I'm not like worried. Does that make sense? I feel like whatever it's going to be, I trust that you know what you're doing here, kid, but you know, don't get cocky. Yeah, I feel like that's about everything, right? Is there anything else, guys, that I missed? I'm out of time here, so I'm going to have to wrap up. But yeah, so this episode, there were a lot of parts of it that I found really fun and I really enjoyed, but there were a lot of like pieces of the plot that things sort of seemed to hinge on that seemed really weird to me. Weak hinges are a problem, you know? So I guess we'll see. There's a lot of stuff that I kind of feel like I won't really know whether or not I am right to be worried about it until the end. So we'll just have to sort of sit back and see what happens. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to let y'all go, and thank you very much for hanging out with me. Thank you again to Jessie for commissioning this episode, and for all of you for hanging out with me in the chat. And I will see you soon. I believe this coming Saturday with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.